Everyone thinks this story is about a passport. It's not. This isn't George Clooney moving abroad, or making some flashy celebrity escape. What actually happened is quieter, and far more intentional. One of Hollywood's most recognizable faces just made a decision that signals he's done playing by the industry's rules, done raising his kids inside a fame machine, and done pretending that success still looks the way it used to. Because when someone who could live anywhere, work forever, and stay untouchable chooses a farmhouse over red carpets, that's not random. That's a message. And the timing of it, that's where things get really interesting. At first glance, the headline sounded almost unreal. George Clooney is now a French citizen. Not relocating. Not extended vacationing. Officially granted citizenship, alongside his wife and their 2 children. For a lot of people that sparked instant confusion. Why would one of America's most iconic movie stars suddenly become French? Was he leaving the US for good? Was this some political statement? Tax move? Or something deeper? Here's the part most people missed. Clooney didn't give anything up. He keeps his US citizenship. French law allows dual nationality, and he made sure that door stayed open. This wasn't about cutting ties, it was about choosing where his real life happens. The decision became public through quiet government decrees, not a press tour or dramatic announcement. No glossy interview rollout. No big explanation. Just paperwork quietly confirming what had already been true behind the scenes for a while. And once fans started digging into where Clooney and his family have actually been spending their time, the shock quickly turned into realization. Because this wasn't sudden at all. It was the final step in a life shift he's been making for years. And the place he chose says everything about what he values now. While Hollywood runs on visibility, premieres, paparazzi, comparisons, constant noise, the part of France Clooney chose operates on the opposite instinct. A working farm. Open land. Long dinners. Days structured around living, not being seen. Clooney has been unusually direct about why that matters to him. He said he didn't want his kids growing up feeling like they were already being measured, ranked, or watched just because of who their parents are. In Los Angeles, fame spills over onto children whether they want it or not. In France, he noticed something different almost immediately. People simply don't care. No photographers hiding near school gates. No strangers comparing kids to other famous families. No pressure to perform. As Clooney put it, France doesn't give a SHT about fame, and for him that wasn't a downside, it was the entire point. Life on the farm isn't about luxury either. It's intentionally ordinary. The kids eat dinner with adults. They clear their own plates. They aren't glued to screens. They're outside, getting bored, figuring things out, living a version of childhood that fame usually erases. And there's a quiet irony there. Clooney has admitted that when he was young he hated growing up around farms. Now it's exactly what he wanted for his children. Not because it looks wholesome in interviews, but because it creates distance from a world that never stops watching. But here's what makes this choice even more revealing. This move wasn't only about protecting his kids. It was also about confronting something he doesn't talk about nearly as often. For years, Clooney has avoided using dramatic language about Hollywood. No rants. No bitter exits. But if you listen closely, the distance has been there for a long time. He's talked about how the culture quietly reshapes people, especially kids, without anyone noticing it happening. How growing up surrounded by status, access, and constant attention warps what feels normal. In that world, even privacy becomes a luxury instead of a basic right. What bothered him most wasn't the cameras aimed at him. It was the invisible pressure placed on his family. The comparisons. The expectations. The idea that his children would be discussed, ranked, and speculated about before they were old enough to understand what any of that meant. France gave him something Hollywood never could. Indifference. Not rejection, indifference. Neighbors who don't care who he is. A culture where celebrity doesn't automatically translate into social power. Where his kids aren't George Clooney's twins, just kids riding bikes and showing up to school. That kind of anonymity isn't accidental. It's chosen. And for someone who spent decades at the center of an industry built on attention, choosing a place that looks away says more than any farewell speech ever could. Yet this shift wasn't only about escaping the spotlight. Because behind the quieter life, there was another realization forming. One that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with time. At a certain point, Clooney stopped pretending he was still in the same race. He's been openly honest about it, not in a dramatic way but in a matter-of-fact one. He said he has no interest in competing with 25-year-old leading men anymore. No desire to keep proving he can still play the same roles, chase the same scripts, or pretend time isn't doing what it always does. Instead, he's pointed to a different model. Paul Newman. An actor who didn't fight aging, didn't cling to youth, and didn't treat every year as something to outrun. Newman shifted his work as his life changed, and Clooney has made it clear that's the path he respects. What makes this hit harder is how specific Clooney gets when he talks about time. He's joked about still being able to play basketball with younger guys, still being in shape, still hanging. But then he follows it with something quieter and more sobering. In 25 years he'll be 85. No diet, workout, or discipline changes that math. That honesty is exactly what makes his recent work feel different. In J. Kelly he plays an aging Hollywood legend, a role that knowingly blurs the line between character and reality. It's reflective, self-aware, and uninterested in pretending youth lasts forever. Not a comeback. Not a reinvention. More like an acknowledgement. When you connect that mindset to his move to France, the picture sharpens. This isn't someone running away from relevance. It's someone choosing how they want the second half of their life to feel. Slower, quieter, and more deliberate. And that choice sparked a much bigger question online. Because once people accepted why he made the move, they started asking something else entirely. Once the news settled in, the speculation started, and it moved fast. Some fans online began to wonder if this was about taxes. Others floated politics. There's been chatter suggesting Clooney was quietly distancing himself from the US altogether, or preparing for a permanent exit from American life. But here's where assumption runs ahead of fact. What's actually confirmed is simple. Clooney still holds US citizenship. He still owns homes in the United States. He continues to work with American studios. Nothing about this move cuts ties or burns bridges. If anything, it keeps options open. The rest lives in the gray space where celebrity decisions always end up. When someone with his visibility makes a quiet change, people rush to fill the silence with theories. It's been said that high-profile relocations are never just personal. But in this case, the evidence keeps pointing back to the same explanation he's been giving for years. Control. Control over privacy. Control over daily life. Control over how his children experience the world. France isn't an escape route. It's a buffer. A place where attention fades into the background and life doesn't revolve around being watched. And that distinction matters. Because leaving something behind is very different from choosing something else. Which brings us to the final detail that makes this decision feel less like a headline, and more like a blueprint. What Clooney describes about life in France doesn't sound glamorous, and that's exactly the point. Evenings are slow. The kids sit at the table with adults. They listen. They talk. When dinner's over, they don't disappear into screens. They clear their own plates and help clean up. There's no rush to entertain them, no constant digital noise filling every quiet moment. Screens aren't the center of their world. Neither is fame. His kids aren't growing up surrounded by people who treat celebrity like currency or attention like oxygen. They're not being praised, judged, or compared because of a last name. They're just living. What makes this choice feel even more deliberate is how familiar it is to him. Clooney has said that a large part of his own childhood was spent around farms. Something he resented at the time. He wanted out. He wanted excitement. He wanted something bigger. Now, decades later, he's come back to the same kind of simplicity. Not because he ran out of options, but because he understands what that environment actually gives you. Space. Perspective. A sense of normal life that money can't manufacture. It's a full circle moment most people don't notice until it's already passed them by. The thing you once wanted to escape becomes the thing you protect for your kids. And that realization leads to a much bigger meaning behind this story. One that has nothing to do with France, passports, or Hollywood at all. In the end, this story isn't about a country change or a new passport. It's about a shift in values. George Clooney didn't walk away from America, and he didn't disappear from Hollywood. What he did was something far rarer. He redefined what winning looks like once the applause fades. Not more roles. Not louder headlines. Not proving anything to anyone younger, faster, or hungrier. Instead, success became quieter. Fewer eyes. Slower days. Kids who grow up unmeasured by fame. A life where being present matters more than being visible. For someone who spent decades at the top of an industry built on attention, choosing obscurity, even partially, is a powerful statement. Not because he had to, but because he could. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. When fame, money, and access stop being the goal, what's left becomes the point. So the question isn't why George Clooney became a French citizen. The question is this: what does success look like when fame no longer matters?